For 8 years I ran the construction payroll system for 12,000 workers across 4 states. Now you're firing me because your MBA niece can do it all in Excel. I asked the VP. Yes, effective Friday, he said. I packed my tools. You've got until Monday morning. Then your crews don't get paid. Tell the union I said good luck. Those were the words that ended my career. I should have seen it coming. Over the last few months, the company had been shifting. A slow change I didn't quite notice until it was too late. The new management, Andrew Rodriguez, VP of Operations, and his niece Ashley, had a different vision for the future. And that vision didn't include me. Or my payroll system. I stood in the empty server room, staring at the blinking lights on the machines. Silence. No hum of the cooling fans, no rhythmic tap of data being processed. I had built this system. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept 12,000 families fed, their bills paid, their lives running smoothly. I knew every line of code, every workaround, every potential failure point. This room, this company, this whole damn operation depended on what I'd created. But today, it didn't matter. Because I was about to lose everything. I took a breath, trying to steady myself. It felt like I was walking through a fog, everything surreal. The quiet, the weight of it all, it hit me hard. My phone buzzed, snapping me back to reality. I looked down at the message from Patricia Williams in HR. Can you come to Andrew's office? I walked through the hallways of the office, past the glass walls that made everything feel sterile, the cold, corporate air conditioning blowing through the vents. My heart pounded with each step, but I forced myself to focus. The company was moving toward what they called digital transformation, which in reality meant cost cutting, replacing the old guard with shiny new ideas that seemed more suited for a PowerPoint than for the real world. When I stepped into Andrew's office, I wasn't surprised to see Ashley sitting there, looking like she owned the place, her perfectly manicured hands tapping away at her iPad. Andrew barely looked up from his tablet. Brian, we're restructuring the IT department, he said, his voice casual, as if this wasn't the moment my life was about to change forever. We're moving to a more agile, cost-effective model. I took a seat across from him, forcing myself to stay calm. What does that mean for payroll operations? That's where it gets exciting, Andrew said, finally glancing up. He nodded toward Ashley, who beamed with that same smug confidence I'd seen before. Ashley's built a comprehensive payroll solution in Excel. It's cloud-based, intuitive, and can handle everything your old system does, but more efficiently. I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. Excel, for 12,000 workers, calculating overtime across 4 states. I could feel the frustration building in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. Ashley, are you seriously suggesting that an Excel spreadsheet can handle payroll for a company this size? With the complexities we deal with. Her smile didn't waver. It's not just any spreadsheet. This one's built with pivot tables, automated macros, and everything your system can do, but in a more modern, user-friendly way. I shook my head, my anger rising. You think you can replace years of custom-built systems with a spreadsheet? You think you can handle multi-state tax codes, union rules, prevailing wages with Excel? Andrew's dismissive tone cut through me like a knife. It's innovation, Brian. You're just holding on to outdated methods. Outdated methods. I'd written every line of that code. I'd adapted it for every new law, every new rule, every new challenge that came our way. But to them, it was just outdated. Ashley looked at me like I was the problem. We're making these changes for the future of the company. For efficiency. I couldn't take it anymore. Ashley, I said, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. Have you ever had to calculate prevailing wages for a federal contract? Have you ever had to explain to a worker why his paycheck's late because the system crashed? Her eyes glazed over like she hadn't a clue. But she had the perfect solution, didn't she? Excel could fix everything. Andrew leaned back in his chair. We're making a change, Brian. You're the only one left who doesn't see it. I stood up, my mind racing. I could feel the weight of the decision they were making. Indecision to let someone without experience tear down everything I'd built. I could walk out of that office, right then and there, or I could fight back. But what was the point? They'd already made up their minds. I said quietly, more to myself than to anyone else. You've got until Monday morning. Then your crews don't get paid. Tell the union I said good luck. I walked out of that office, my heart heavy but my resolve hardening. This was it. The beginning of the end. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. Total estimated words 600 target 600s. I sat in my truck, staring at the parking lot, the weight of the meeting still pressing on me. It was a quiet morning, the sun barely peeking over the horizon, casting a soft light on the row of cars in front of me. I should have felt something, anger, frustration, maybe even relief, but all I could do was stare. The company was changing, but I didn't realize how deep it went until I had to look at Andrew and Ashley in that office. Andrew Rodriguez had only been with the company for a few months, but it felt like he'd been here forever. The son of the owners, he came in with all the ideas: digital transformation, efficiency, streamlining. It sounded like a bunch of corporate buzzwords, but Andrew wore them like badges of honor. He had an MBA from a fancy school, and it showed. The man talked like he was trying to sell me a used car every time he opened his mouth. And then there was Ashley, his niece, 25, fresh out of an MBA program herself, and already convinced that she had the world figured out. She had that look, the one that said, "I know better than you, and I don't have to listen." She didn't understand the first thing about the payroll system I had worked on for years. And yet, here she was, with her shiny new Excel model, ready to toss it all out. It wasn't just her confidence that grated on me, it was the sheer ignorance behind it. She didn't understand what it took to run a payroll system for 12,000 people. To her, it was just numbers. To me, it was people's lives. When a payroll run fails, it's not just a spreadsheet crashing. It's families waiting for paychecks, workers wondering if they'll have enough to buy groceries or pay rent. I had built that system from scratch. Every quirk, every workaround, every emergency fix. I knew it all. The unions, the tax codes, the overtime, the job classifications that changed depending on the day of the week. But none of that mattered. Not to Andrew, not to Ashley. As I made my way inside, I passed the glossy conference rooms, the glass walls that had become the new office standard. Everything looked pristine, polished. But there was something cold about it. The hum of the machines, the smell of old coffee in the break room, it all felt distant, as if the heart of the company had been replaced by a shiny new facade. I couldn't help but feel like an outsider now. The same office that used to feel like home now felt alien, even hostile. Andrew was at his desk when I walked in. He didn't bother to look up as I entered, just kept typing away on his tablet. The room was minimalist, everything in its place, sterile. He finally glanced up, his face tight, but there was no apology in his eyes. Only business. "Brian," he said, his voice casual like we were discussing a quarterly report. "We're restructuring the IT department." The words hit me harder than I expected. "Restructuring," he said. As if it wasn't the end of my career, but just another business decision. He didn't even look at me when he said it, like I was already gone. I forced myself to stay calm. "What does that mean for payroll operations?" Ashley, who had been sitting quietly across the room, piped up with her usual self-assured tone. "We're implementing a new payroll solution. My model in Excel is going to replace everything you've been doing." She slid her iPad onto the desk, the glass screen reflecting the fluorescent lights above. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the chair. "Excel? Are you serious? You want to replace an entire payroll system with a spreadsheet?" "It's not just any spreadsheet," she said, almost condescendingly. "It's cloud-based, it's intuitive, and it's more efficient than what you're using." I couldn't believe it. "Ashley," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you can't run payroll for 12,000 people with Excel. This isn't just about numbers. It's about compliance, regulations, and a million tiny details you wouldn't even know to look for." But she just smiled. "It's built with pivot tables, macros, and automated systems. It'll streamline everything." I shook my head. Streamlining is fine when you're not dealing with multi-state taxes, union rules, and government contracts. You want to take all that complexity and shove it into a spreadsheet. Andrew finally spoke up, his voice almost dismissive. "Brian, we're moving forward. We can't keep doing things the old way. It's inefficient." I felt my chest tighten. I had spent the last 8 years maintaining that system. I knew every line of code, every potential flaw, every time a glitch might occur. I had written it to handle everything the company threw at it. But to Andrew and Ashley, it was just old. "You're firing me because you think Excel can do it better?" I asked, my voice low. "Yes," Andrew said flatly, his eyes never meeting mine. "It's time for a change." I couldn't believe it. I was being replaced by a spreadsheet, by a system no one had even tested under real conditions. The company I had poured my life into was throwing me away for the promise of something new. I stood up, my fist clenched. "You've got until Monday morning. Then your crews don't get paid." "Tell the union I said good luck." I turned and walked out of that office, my steps feeling heavier with each one. It felt like the last piece of control I had was slipping through my fingers. And all I could think about was how those 12,000 workers were going to feel when they didn't get paid on time. It wasn't just a job for me. It was their livelihood, but I had no control over what was happening now. I was out, and the chaos was just beginning. Was in total estimated words 1,000 trust target 1,000s. I spent the next few days in a haze, just going through the motions. It wasn't until Thursday that I really began to grasp the enormity of what was happening. My phone buzzed with another text from Patricia. "Can you come in early tomorrow? We need you to meet with Ashley again." I stared at the message for a long time, weighing my options. Every part of me wanted to throw in the towel and walk away. Let Ashley have the mess she'd made, but something about it nagged at me. I'd built this system. I knew it inside and out. To just walk away and let her screw it up. To let everything I had worked for be erased by a few keystrokes. I couldn't do it. So, I drove to the office the next morning, the weight of the decision still hanging heavy in my chest. The sun was just rising, and the parking lot was still mostly empty. The hum of the fluorescent lights in the hallway seemed louder than usual, and the smell of stale coffee from the break room clung to the air. It felt like any other day, but nothing would be the same after today. When I walked into Andrew's office, Ashley was already there, sitting at the sleek glass desk with her iPad open in front of her. She looked up as I entered, that same confident, almost smug smile on her face. She didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable. "Morning, Brian," she said, as if everything was perfectly normal. Andrew was already sitting in his chair, his fingers drumming absently on the desk. "Brian, we need to finalize the transition," he said, not bothering to look up. "Ashley's model is ready to go. We're moving forward with it." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I've been working on payroll for 8 years. I said slowly, my voice betraying none of the frustration I was feeling. "I know this system. You don't just switch something like this over on a whim." Ashley interrupted me, her voice light and breezy. "I've tested it, Brian. It works. You really just need to get on board. This is going to save the company so much time." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You've tested it?" I asked, leaning forward. "You've tested it on a few dummy numbers maybe. But this isn't just about formulas. You can't replace a system like mine with a spreadsheet." I could see her getting defensive, the smile fading slightly. "It's not just any spreadsheet," she said, almost like she was explaining something to a child. "It's cloud-based, and it's set up with macros and lookup tables. It handles everything your system does, but more efficiently." I tried to keep my voice steady, even though I could feel my anger bubbling up. "You're telling me that an Excel spreadsheet can handle multi-state tax rates, prevailing wages for federal contracts, union rules, and overtime for 12,000 workers. You're not just dealing with numbers, Ashley, you're dealing with people's lives." She waved me off, as if I was overreacting. "It's built to handle all of that. We'll be fine. And if there's any issue, we have tech support ready to step in." I stared at her, my disbelief growing with each word. "You have tech support?" I repeated. "Do you even understand the system you're replacing? How it's customized for this company? How every part of it is tied together?" Andrew finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "We're doing this, Brian. The board's on board. The decision's been made." The words stung, more than they should have. I had spent years building and maintaining this system. I had put in the hours, the late nights, the weekends. And now it was all being tossed aside because Andrew and Ashley thought they could make everything better with a shiny new model. "I'm not just gonna sit here and watch you ruin everything I've worked for," I said, trying to keep my voice even. Ashley shrugged. "You don't have a choice." I wanted to tell her what I really thought, but what good would it do? She didn't understand. None of them did. They thought they could fix everything with spreadsheets and buzzwords, without realizing that what they were replacing wasn't just a piece of software. It was the backbone of a system that kept everything running. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I said, my voice tight. "You've got until Monday morning. After that, your crews don't get paid. Tell the union I said good luck." I walked out of the office, feeling the weight of the words hanging in the air behind me. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew one thing: I couldn't let this go without a fight. Total estimated words wall 100 a target 1200s. The next few days passed in a blur. I was no longer part of the team. They'd made it clear. I spent my time at home, pacing, watching the clock. I wasn't sure what I expected to happen next, but I knew one thing: I couldn't just let it go. Not after everything I'd put into that company. On Tuesday morning, Patricia called me again. "Can you come in? We need to have a meeting," she said. Her voice was tight, like she already knew what was coming. I could tell from the way she spoke that things weren't going well. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door, the weight of the decision weighing on me with every step. When I arrived at the office, the energy in the building felt different. The usual hum of conversation, the ring of phones, the sound of keys tapping, all of it was gone. I made my way to Andrew's office. When I walked in, Andrew was already sitting behind his desk, but this time, there was a sense of urgency in the air. He didn't look up immediately. Instead, he stared at the screen in front of him, tapping a pen against his desk, like he was thinking something over. Ashley was sitting off to the side, staring down at her iPad, not saying a word. "Brian, have a seat," Andrew said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. Something was different today. But I couldn't place it. I sat down and Patricia entered a moment later, looking nervous. The door clicked shut behind her, and I could tell everyone was bracing for something. "We need to talk about the payroll system," Andrew said, his eyes finally meeting mine. "There's been a problem." "A problem," the understatement of the year. I raised an eyebrow, letting him continue. "It's worse than we thought," he continued. "We ran the test data yesterday and it's not good. The system crashed." He hesitated, like the words didn't quite fit. "It crashed hard. We lost a lot of data." My stomach dropped. "You lost data," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. I warned you this would happen." Andrew shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I know you did. And I'm sorry. But we thought Ashley's model could handle it. We didn't expect the magnitude of what we were dealing with." Ashley finally looked up, her face pale. She didn't say anything, but her eyes told the whole story. She knew this was her mess, but she wasn't ready to admit it. "Do you understand the complexity of what you're replacing?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "This isn't a toy, Ashley. This is people's livelihoods." She didn't respond. "Andrew," I said, turning back to him, "what happens now?" He sighed, rubbing his face. "We're in a bit of a bind. We're gonna need to roll back to the old system. I know you've left, but we need your help. We need you to come back, even if it's just to fix this mess. We don't have anyone else who can do it." The words hung in the air. My heart pounded in my chest. They had no one else. They'd thrown me out, treated me like I was obsolete. And now they were begging for my help. It stung, but I knew what I had to do. I took a breath, trying to calm the anger that had been building inside me. "You want me to fix your mistake, is that it?" Andrew nodded, his eyes pleading. "Yes, Brian. We need you to come back, even if it's just for this one thing. We'll pay you whatever you need. We'll work something out." I glanced over at Ashley, who still wasn't speaking. The realization of her failure was written all over her face, but she wouldn't acknowledge it. She was too proud to admit she was wrong. "I can't fix this on my own," I said, my voice quieter now. "You're going to need more than just me. You're going to need to go back to square one and rebuild everything, starting from the ground up. You can't just patch this together with more innovations from a spreadsheet." Andrew didn't argue. He knew I was right. "Please, Brian," he said, sounding defeated. "Whatever it takes. We just need to get payroll up and running again." I was silent for a moment, weighing my options. I had a choice now. I could walk away and leave them to deal with the mess they'd created. Or I could go back, fix their failure, and make sure they never forgot why they needed me in the first place. I could feel the decision weighing heavily on me, but deep down, I knew what I had to do. "Fine," I said, standing up. "But it's going to cost you. I'm not doing this for free, and I'm not coming back unless I get what I deserve." Andrew didn't hesitate. "Name your price," he said, already pulling out his tablet to start the paperwork. $15,000, I said firmly. "Up front. And I want a new contract. Double my old salary." There was a long pause before he spoke again, but I could see the relief in his eyes. "Don't," he said. I turned and walked out of the room, my mind already working on how to fix the damage they'd done. But one thing was clear: I wasn't just fixing their system. I was going to make them realize exactly how much they needed me. And when this was over, I was going to take control back, piece by piece. Total estimated words 1,000, target 1,000. I walked into the office the next morning with a different sense of purpose. The building still felt cold and sterile, with its polished floors and open spaces that once felt like home, but now seemed more like a place I didn't belong. I passed by a few familiar faces in the hallway, all of them casting sidelong glances in my direction, probably wondering why I was back after I had walked out so decisively. The morning air was thick with tension, and the familiar smells of coffee and stale paper didn't provide their usual comfort. Instead, everything felt charged, as though something was about to snap at any moment. I made my way to the server room, the one place in the building I could still call my own. The hum of the machines was a comfort, though not quite as reassuring as it used to be. It had been too long since I had been in control, and I couldn't ignore the feeling of being on borrowed time. I knew I couldn't fix the mess left behind by Ashley's ill-conceived payroll solution overnight, but I was determined to do what I could. The door clicked open as I stepped inside, and I could see the chaos laid out in front of me. The system was a mess: data missing, incomplete files, corrupted records. I could already tell there was no quick fix. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just a simple system failure. It was the result of someone trying to replace years of knowledge with something they didn't fully understand. The office felt heavier as I sat down at my old workstation. The keyboard under my fingers was familiar, but the tension in the air was different. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, like everyone was waiting for me to fail, so they could point to me and say, "I told you so." But I wasn't gonna let that happen. I had built this system from the ground up. I wasn't going to let a few careless mistakes undo everything. I spent the next few hours combing through the wreckage, checking the databases, and pulling logs. I had to piece everything back together. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy. As the hours stretched on, I could feel the weight of the work piling up, but there was no going back. This was my job now, and I had to fix it, even if it meant working through the night. Around noon, I got a call from Patricia. "Brian, how's it going in there?" she asked, her voice tight. I could tell she was already stressed about the situation. "It's worse than I thought," I said, rubbing my temples as I stared at the screen in front of me. "This isn't just a technical issue anymore. It's a disaster." I could hear her sigh on the other end of the line. "Andrew's getting impatient," she said, almost apologetically. "He doesn't understand why it's taking so long. He thought this would be a quick fix." I wanted to laugh, but it came out more like a bitter exhale. "Of course he did," I muttered. "They thought Ashley's magic spreadsheet could do it all. Now they're realizing it's not just about having fancy formulas and macros. It's about the real work. The things you can't just plug into a template." Patricia didn't say anything at first. I could hear the hesitation in her voice when she spoke again. "Do you think we'll be able to get this back on track? The union's getting restless, and we've got deadlines looming." I took a deep breath. "I don't know, Patricia. I'm doing what I can, but the truth is, we're way past the point where we can just patch this up with a few quick fixes. This is going to take time." She was quiet for a long time, and I could tell she was absorbing the reality of it all. Finally she spoke. "I'll let Andrew know. Just keep us posted, okay?" "Yeah," I said, rubbing my eyes. "I'll keep you posted." The call ended and I went back to work. I couldn't focus on anything else. It felt like every second mattered. I went through the payroll system line by line, sorting out issues with tax calculations, misfiled data, and errors that were creeping up all over the place. It was a maze, and I was the only one who knew the way through it. By the time the sun started to set, I had made some progress. The payroll system wasn't fixed, but I had cleared a few hurdles, enough to feel like I was getting somewhere. It was far from perfect, but it was a start. I had saved a few critical files and identified some of the key problems I needed to address. The worst was still ahead of me, but I had to believe that I could pull this off. I paused for a moment and looked out the window. The city skyline was bathed in a soft orange glow from the setting sun, but it didn't bring me the peace it usually did. The weight of the job I had ahead of me was too much to ignore. There was no guarantee that I could fix the mess Ashley had created. But I wasn't going to give up. I couldn't. I had worked too hard to watch it all come crashing down, because of someone who thought they could replace experience with a few fancy formulas. This was my system. I built it. And I was going to fix it, no matter what it took. The office was quiet now. The day had turned to night, and I was still sitting at my desk, my eyes bloodshot from staring at the screen for hours. But I couldn't stop. I had to get this right. It was my only option. Total estimated words 1,000, target 1,000s. By the time I hit the third day of fixing Ashley's mess, the exhaustion was starting to settle in. My hands were sore from typing, my back aching from hours hunched over the desk. But I couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. I still had to get this payroll run done. Every second mattered. The clock was ticking. The morning had passed in a haze of frustration and desperation. I was chasing down corrupted records, missing files, and databases that refused to connect. It felt like trying to put out a fire with a garden hose that had a hole in it. I had to work through every single error, one by one. And I could feel the weight of every decision I made. This wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about 12,000 workers waiting on their paychecks. And I was the only one who could make sure they got paid. Around noon, I got a text from Eddie. Heard the payroll system's still down. Jim's talking about pulling his guys from the job site. He says he's not doing another thing until the checks go through. My heart sank. Jim Patterson was one of the toughest guys I'd ever worked with. When he spoke, people listened. If he pulled his workers off the job, it would be the first domino to fall. The whole operation could come to a standstill, and the union would be all over it. I didn't have time for that. Not now. I responded quickly. Tell him to hang tight. I'm doing everything I can. I'll have it fixed by this afternoon. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Every time I thought I was close, I ran into another problem. It was like whack-a-mole, fix one issue, and another one popped up. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered corrupted data, inconsistent formulas, lookup tables that didn't match, and tax rates that had been overwritten with incorrect values. This wasn't a simple crash, it was a full-on disaster. By the time the afternoon rolled around, I had managed to restore the core system, but there were still pieces missing. The payroll data was half intact, and I couldn't run the calculations until I corrected the discrepancies. I was running out of time. I couldn't afford another mistake. I grabbed my phone and dialed Patricia's number. She picked up on the second ring. "Brian, how's it going?" she asked, her voice tight with anxiety. I rubbed my forehead, fighting the headache building behind my eyes. "It's not good. I've got the system running, but there are still critical gaps. If I can't get the tax calculations sorted, we won't be able to process the payments. We're down to the wire." She didn't say anything at first. I could hear the soft hum of her office in the background. I could imagine her pacing, trying to figure out how to make this right. Finally, she spoke. "I'll let Andrew know. He's been asking for updates every hour. He's getting antsy." I clenched my jaw. "Tell him I'm doing everything I can. But he needs to understand this is going to take time." "I will," she said, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. She knew as well as I did that Andrew wasn't patient. He wanted results, and he wanted them now. But the reality was, the damage was done. Ashley had broken everything, and I was the one trying to fix it. After I hung up, I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. The numbers blurred together, the frustration starting to cloud my thoughts. I could feel the weight of everything bearing down on me. It wasn't just the company at stake, it was the workers, their paychecks, their families. They depended on this. I took a deep breath and rolled my shoulders. I had to keep moving. I couldn't afford to lose focus now. Around 4 in the afternoon, I finally got the calculations sorted. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I ran the payroll files through the system, praying it wouldn't crash again. The hours felt like they stretched on forever, but when the confirmation screen finally popped up, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The payroll was ready to go. It was done. I hit the transmit button, and the system began sending the payroll data to the bank. My heart was pounding as I watched the progress bar. It felt like the longest 10 seconds of my life. When the transmission was complete, I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but relieved. I had done it. Just then, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Eddie. "Payroll's good to go. Jim just called. Says the crew's back on the job. Good work, Brian." I smiled for the first time in days. The feeling of relief was almost overwhelming. The workers were getting paid. The union wasn't going to come crashing down on us. I had saved the day. At least for now. But I knew this was far from over. The damage had been done. Ashley had made her mark, and the system would never be the same. I wasn't just fixing the software anymore. I was fixing her mistake, cleaning up the mess she'd left behind. And I had a feeling I wasn't going to get the thanks I deserved for it. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 6 in the evening. I hadn't eaten all day, and my stomach growled in protest. But I couldn't stop. I had to make sure the system was fully operational before I left. It wasn't just about today, it was about what came next. The job wasn't over yet. Total estimated words 2,000, target 2,000s. By Thursday morning, I was already at my desk before the sun had fully risen. The office was quiet, almost too quiet. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the faint sound of my keyboard tapping, and the occasional rustle of papers from the empty cubicles around me. It was the calm before the storm. I knew the worst was still to come. But I had made enough progress to give myself a small moment of relief. I had managed to fix the payroll system, but only just. The data was rolling through smoothly now, but I could already see the cracks. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. And I was going to need to keep an eye on it for the foreseeable future. The work that I'd done had patched the immediate holes, but there were so many layers of complexity that I couldn't be sure everything was truly stable yet. I had worked through the night, relying on sheer willpower to get the job done. But now, as the first light of morning crept in, I felt the weight of exhaustion settle into my bones. The phone rang, breaking the silence. I picked it up without thinking. "Brian, it's Andrew," came the voice on the other end. I could hear the tension in his tone, the weight of the past few days bearing down on him. "How's it going? Are we good for the payroll run?" I leaned back in my chair, my fingers rubbing my eyes. I said, my voice hoarse. "But there's still a lot to do. I've fixed the immediate issues, but I can't guarantee it'll hold up without further testing." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I understand. We've already had a meeting with the union," Andrew said, his voice flat. "They're asking about the next payroll. They're not happy with the delays." I clenched my jaw, trying to ignore the irritation that bubbled up inside me. The union had every right to be upset. But this wasn't on me. "The system crashed because of your niece's Excel model, Andrew," I said, my voice low. "I'm fixing it, but you can't expect miracles." "I know," he replied, sounding almost defeated. "But we've got to keep this moving. The longer it takes, the more it's going to cost us. And I'm not sure how much more I can justify this to the higher ups." I gritted my teeth, the familiar anger creeping in. I had warned them. I had told them this was coming. But they didn't listen. And now here I was, cleaning up their mess. I'll keep working on it, I said, keeping my voice. But you need to understand that rushing this is going to make things worse. You can't just flip a switch and expect everything to work. This is a complex system, Andrew. I get it, he said, his voice softening slightly. We're not rushing you, just keep me updated. I hung up the phone and exhaled slowly. I was tired, and this job wasn't getting any easier. I had spent years building the payroll system, and now I was watching it fall apart in front of me. It wasn't just about the system anymore. It was about everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed to make sure this company ran smoothly. I stared at the screen for a moment, trying to focus. The payroll was processing, but I could already see the flaws in the system. There were still issues with the tax calculations, and the union classifications weren't properly updated. I had patched the cracks, but I knew this was only the beginning. I couldn't just fix everything with a few tweaks. The foundation of the system was broken, and it was going to take a lot more than a quick fix to put it back together. I needed help. But who could I trust? I glanced at the clock. It was almost time for the next payroll cycle to begin, and the pressure was building. My phone buzzed with a text from Eddie. Everything's still good here. But Jim's asking about the next round. He wants to know when the new system's going to be live. I didn't know how to answer. I couldn't give him a definite timeline. Not yet. Not until I could be sure everything was stable. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes again. The weight of the situation was overwhelming, and I knew the worst was still ahead. I had to keep going, but the exhaustion was starting to take its toll. I hadn't had a decent night's sleep in days, and my body was starting to feel the strain. I glanced at the office door as I heard footsteps in the hall. Patricia walked in, her expression unreadable. She wasn't here to check on me. She was here because the storm was coming. "How's it going?" she asked, her voice low, but there was a sense of urgency in her tone. "I'm getting there," I said, forcing myself to sound more confident than I felt. "The payroll run is processing, but there are still issues. I've fixed the basics, but it's far from done." She nodded, but her eyes told me she already knew the situation. "Andrew's been asking about the next steps. He's starting to worry about the delays. The union's on his back, and HR's asking if we're gonna meet the deadlines." I could feel the pressure building again, like a vice around my chest. It was like the walls were closing in, and no matter how much I did, it wasn't enough. The stakes were too high. The union was already pushing back, and I couldn't afford another mistake. "Tell Andrew I'll have it fixed. But it's going to take time," I said, my voice firm but weary. "I can't rush it, the system's too complex. He needs to understand that." "I'll let him know," Patricia said, her voice quiet, almost sympathetic. "But Brian, you've got to understand. We're running out of time." I watched as she left the room, the door clicking softly behind her. I sat there for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. I was running out of time. But the real question was, could I fix it before everything fell apart? Total estimated words wall 100 target 1200s. By Friday morning, I was standing in Andrew's office, staring out the window, feeling like I had just fought a war and somehow survived. The sun was coming up, casting a soft glow over the parking lot below. It should have been a moment of peace. But all I could feel was the weight of the past few days pressing on me. The payroll crisis had been averted, for now. The workers had been paid. The system was functional, and the union was off our backs. But the cost of getting to this point had been high, and I wasn't sure I could ever go back to the way things were. Andrew walked in, his face a mixture of exhaustion and relief. He was wearing his usual suit, but there was something about the way he carried himself, now that made him seem smaller. He didn't look like the confident, corporate powerhouse he had when I first met him. He looked like someone who had just barely managed to avoid disaster. "Brian," he said quietly, his voice lacking its usual authority. "I just wanted to thank you. We wouldn't have made it without you." I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. There was a lump in my throat, a mixture of anger and satisfaction that I couldn't fully process. I had saved the day, yes. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival. "You've made it right," Andrew continued, his words carefully chosen. "The payroll's been processed, and I've spoken with the union. We're in the clear." I nodded, my mind replaying the last few days. The countless hours spent fixing mistakes, reworking calculations, and battling the overwhelming sense of inevitability. I had done it. I had kept everything from completely falling apart. But there was no satisfaction in it. No relief. "Where's Ashley?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop myself. Andrew's expression tightened for a moment, then he looked away. "She's been reassigned," he said, his voice flat. I couldn't help the small, bitter chuckle that escaped my lips. "Marketing," I repeated. "Of course." The silence in the room grew heavier. Andrew shifted uncomfortably. "I know you're frustrated, Brian, but we had to make a decision. You know how this business works. I met his gaze then, my voice cold. I know exactly how this business works, Andrew. And I know how easily people like Ashley can come in with their shiny ideas and ruin everything that's been built. Andrew didn't respond, he couldn't. He knew I was right. He had tried to sell me on the idea that Ashley's model could fix everything, and in the end, it had been a disaster. But I had saved them all. I had fixed what they had broken. There was a knock on the door, and Patricia stepped in, her face a little more relaxed than usual. "Everything's in order," she said, glancing at Andrew. "We're good to go for the next payroll cycle." Andrew nodded, looking at her with a tired smile. "Thank you, Patricia." I stood there for a moment, taking it all. The weight of the last few days still clung to me. But there was something else now, a sense of closure. The company was back on track. The workers were paid. And I had gotten the last word. "So, what happens now?" I asked, turning back to Andrew. He shifted in his chair, looking uncertain. "Well, we're offering you a new role," he said, his tone slightly awkward. "A higher position, with more responsibility. We've got a corner office with a view of the yard for you." I raised an eyebrow. "A corner office?" Andrew nodded. "It's yours, Brian, you've earned it. You've been with us for so long, and you've shown us the value of real experience. We want you to stay, to help guide the company through the next phase." For a moment, I was silent. The offer was tempting, a new office. But I wasn't sure it was enough to make up for the last few days, the frustration, the betrayal. The reality of what had happened still lingered in the back of my mind. "You want me to stay?" I said slowly, "but only because I saved your asses." Andrew's face reddened slightly, but he didn't deny it. "Yes, Brian. And because we know you're the best at what you do." I thought about it for a long moment. The truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted to stay. This company, these people, they had thrown me aside the moment they thought they had something better. They had wanted to replace experience with theory, and I had shown them the hard way that there was no substitute for real, world knowledge. But there was something in the offer that tugged at me. A chance to rebuild, to take control again. "I'll think about it," I said finally, my voice steady. "But you better be sure you understand what you're asking. You've seen what happens when you don't listen to the people who know what they're doing." Andrew nodded quickly, grateful for my response. "We'll be waiting, Brian." I stood up, heading for the door. "I need a drink," I muttered to myself as I walked out of the office. As I stepped into the elevator, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and scrolled through the messages. One stood out from Eddie. "Heard Ashley's working in marketing now. Think she can handle calculating ad impressions." I smiled to myself. "No," I muttered under my breath. "I don't think she can." When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into the lobby, my heart finally starting to slow down. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to be overlooked again. I had earned my place, and no one was going to take it from me. I walked out of the building, the sun warming my face, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Total estimated words 1 or target 1,000.